So fortunately, at the same time that they removed the old process, they introduced a newer one that was, in the long run, quite a bit better and easier to work with. So they introduced something called the Web Data Service. And what it is a series of REST endpoints that you can use to get various pieces of data from Statistics Canada. So for example, the first one in the list there, get change series list, gives you pretty much what you'd expect. If you call that service, it will return to you a list of all of the various, series that have been updated that day. And more importantly, for my purposes, down near the bottom, you can see there's a get full table CSV. So that allows you to send the web data service a table that you want, and it gives you a link that lets you download a compressed CSV file that has the full, all the series in the table going back for the full history. So they had that, but of course, then I had to get a way to actually interact with it and extract the data that I wanted. So that's where the StatsCan package originated from. And I had a pretty quick timeline to get at least an initial working prototype together, because I think it, they brought out that service on Monday and the labor force survey was coming out on Friday. So I really needed to get it going quickly. So what does the package do? The first thing that it is just, it's an API wrapper. So if we go back to all of these endpoints, it's just a nice little thing that turns those into Python functions that you can just call that will return you, a dictionary or a list or something corresponding to the data that they want. On top of that, it's also got a lot of helper tools in terms of taking the data that you've extracted from Statistics Canada and turning it into pandas data frames or pandas series. And also it allows you to store tables that you've already downloaded in a processed and compressed format that's quick to read back out. Lets you update all of the tables that you've previously downloaded. There's a few other pieces of helper functionality, and the documentation goes into more details on that. So I won't give a full laundry list of what it does, but the basic idea, as you can see from the screenshot, is that you import StatsCan, you tell it the name of the table that you want. If you haven't already downloaded it, it downloads it for you, it converts it into a data frame, and then you're off to the races and you can work with it just like you would any other data frame in Python. So kind of flashing back to the beginning of the project, like I said, how it started, it was, I guess, June 7th, 2018, according to GitHub. And at the time that I started developing it, I've been working with Python for data analysis for probably about a year. I didn't have a ton of experience with Git, as you can probably tell from the some of the commit messages, like lots of fixes. That's not really best practice. And also, I'd never built a package before. I didn't really know anything about actually building packages. I'd written a lot of scripts that, ran top to bottom and did something, but this was my first experience really building something that was an actual library. So from that, we come to the present, where it's a package that's available on PyPI and Anaconda Cloud. It's got tests, it's got documentation. The tests actually have pretty good coverage. And I've even managed to get some external people to contribute to the project, which is fantastic. And since I have a pretty big audience right now, I'd encourage you all to join the contributor list if you're interested. So I think the best way to kind of talk about what my experience was like developing the project is to go through a timeline of how it evolved from the initial creation to the present. So like I said, the first changes happened right in June of 2018. The web data service went live and I started working on StatsCan pretty much the same day. It was maybe the next day. About a month after that, I was getting sick of trying to fix one part or add a new feature to one part and then having it break something else. So I actually got around to writing some tests, which are, if you're not familiar with, but tests in software engineering, it's highly recommended. They're very useful. About a month after that, I finally got it together to the point where it was an actual package that I could upload to Anaconda Cloud and other people would be able to download. Prior to that, I'd just been, adding it to the path of whatever project I was working on. Again, I was just trying to kind of hack something together to get my work done. So after a couple months, it was actually at the point where I could share it with other people. So that marked version 1.0. I added a little demo Jupyter notebook that would kind of show how it worked. And yeah, that was the first milestone where it kind of actually became a package. Still in pretty rough shape at that point though. Over the winter break, I took some extra time to actually create documentation, which is another thing that you should really do if you're going to build a library. I got that pushed up to Read the Docs, which is a free service for open source projects to host documentation. So it's fantastic for anything like this. And I did a big refactor. I cleaned up a lot of the code. I added more tests. The test coverage actually got pretty good. And I made enough changes that I figured that was reason enough to bump it up to version 2.0. The next big milestone came a few months after that, when, similar to the testing being a manual process initially, I got sick of having to run my tests and then upload a new version of my package manually every time I made changes. So I finally set up a CI, continuous integration. And that was, at the time, it was through Travis. Now I'm using GitHub Actions. I'll talk a little bit more about that. But basically, that's a service where anytime you push up some changes to your code to GitHub, a computer automatically spins up, creates an environment, installs your library, runs your tests, and just tells you if it worked or not, and potentially uploads a new version of it to Anaconda Cloud, which is what I had set up. The next big milestone was in the fall. So I went to Pycon Canada in Toronto, which was a great experience. If you have the chance, you should definitely go once we're actually going to conferences again. And one of the things that came out of that was I went to a hackathon sponsored by Mozilla after that, and I met someone who was interested in contributing to the package, which was great. It was really interesting to have their contributions, and it also made me realize how much of the documentation and the interface was lacking in terms of being accessible to someone who hadn't been working on this project for the last year or so. So that really forced me to reconsider how I was structuring it and make it into something that was actually usable and accessible to other people, both as developers and users. So that was a really valuable experience. In January of just last year, so about a year ago, I got the second external contributor, someone from I believe they work at City of Calgary, added a progress bar for the downloads, which now that they've added it, I don't know how I lived without it. I download lots and lots of tables, usually when I'm using StatsCan, and they're pretty big, some of them. So prior to the status bar, I would hit download and then my computer would just not do anything for, up to half an hour. And now there's this great progress bar that shows me, here are all the tables you've downloaded, here's their progress. It's great. The next milestone that happened was in May, and this was cool just because I think this person actually works at Statistics Canada, and they contributed to the project. So that was very validating and exciting. And they didn't add new features. It wasn't a flashy thing like a progress bar, but what they did was they added improved functionality and stability. So behind the scenes stuff that most end users won't notice because their program will just run better. So I definitely appreciate those sorts of contributions as well. And then, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I thought I mistook the end of the page. We had a question about how people who are interested in contributing, how they might be able to do that.
Oh, okay, for sure. So I have a slide coming up of like specific things that I personally think would be useful to contribute on, but more broadly, if people have ideas or they just want to learn more about the package, I would say the first thing I'd encourage you to do is check out the documentation. Beyond that, if there's anything in the documentation that you find is lacking or difficult to understand, and you think you have an idea to make it better, if you're comfortable with Git and pull requests, by all means, just make a pull request. But if you're not, that's totally okay too. Just reach out to me on Twitter and let me know your thoughts, and I'll totally work with you to incorporate those. If you are more experienced as a developer and you're comfortable with Git and pull requests, like I've got a couple issues up in the repository. Some of them are marked as good first issue. So like by all means, just fork the repo and make a contribution. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, I think so. Maybe we can give a little bit. I'd say we can maybe continue and give a little bit of a background on Git and GitHub and issues maybe at the end of this, just because I see there's a couple other questions about about source control and maybe some of those most software engineering topics that not everybody is as familiar with. So we can maybe address that at the end.
For sure. Okay, so I have just the one last comment on the timeline. So the most recent thing that I did was in the fall of last year, I read a really great series of posts called Hypermodern Python that talked about some best practices around creating a Python package, and I incorporated a lot of those into StatsCan, and in turn got it into a state where I could create packages that I could submit to PyPI, which is the standard place that most Python libraries and packages are available, and also CondaForge, which is the most common community maintained repository for Conda packages, which are for mostly scientific Python, but also some other related packages as well. So that brings me to the current tool stack. These are the tools that I use to maintain and update the package. And again, I'm happy to go into more details on any of these, but I'll just sort of give a brief overview of what they are and what they do. So the first thing, like I said, I've blatantly copied most of my tool stack from the Hypermodern Python series. If you are interested in learning in more detail about how to build a library or package in Python, I really recommend that series. It goes through everything in great detail, and it's opinionated in a good way. It's not going to tell you that there's 6 different ways to do something. It'll just say, here's the way that I like to do it and why. It's really good for that. So based on that recommendation, I use a tool called Poetry to manage the virtual environment and to build the package itself. Poetry is really nice. It lets you keep your development requirements separate from your package requirements. So for example, Statistics Canada or the StatsCan library needs pandas in order to be able to create the tables. And so that's a package requirement. And I also need PyTest to run my test, but the end users don't need PyTest. So Poetry has a nice separation of those two. CondaForge actually has a bot that just generates the Conda package now. It's great. It just reads the PyPI page, and whenever there's an update there, I get a little bot alert that tells me that it's going to build a new package for CondaForge. So that's awesome. That's one less thing for me to worry about. I already mentioned Read the Docs. They're a free documentation hosting service. Highly recommend them. PyTest and Coverage, again, for running my unit tests and making sure that I'm actually testing the majority of my code base. Those are great tools. There is a built-in testing framework in Python called Unit Test, but I'd really recommend PyTest to anyone who's new to testing. It's much more intuitive to use. I also use Black and Flake 8 just to clean up and format my code. It's a nice way to keep everything consistent without having to spend a lot of time myself, putting spaces after the commas and making sure my line breaks are in the right place. So it's just one less thing to worry about if I just have that automated. And on that note, I use pre-commit to make sure that those actually run and pass before I commit any code to GitHub. So that prevents me from having a bunch of fixed typo commits in my repository history. The last tool that I run on my machine is called Nox. And it's a tool for coordinating running tests, code linting, code formatting against multiple versions of Python. So that's a really useful way to make sure that your library works on, say, Python 3.7 and 3.8 and 3.9 without having to create all those environments yourself and manually test them. And then the final piece of the workflow is GitHub Actions. So that's set up so that whenever I make a pull request or whenever anyone else makes a pull request, it automatically runs all my tests. So it tells me if anything's been broken. And if the pull request is successful and the changes are merged into the main branch, it will build an updated version of the package and upload it to PyPI, which in turn will kick off a build for CondaForge. So it's as automated as I can make it. And I'm pretty happy with the tool stack overall. Okay, so speaking of contributions, here are some things just off the top of my head that I am aware that the current package is lacking. And if someone in the audience or anywhere else wanted to contribute any of these changes, that would be more than welcome. So the first one is French language support. Some of the StatsCan API endpoints have the option to return results in English or French. I'm an Anglophone. I only really set it up for English, and I haven't gotten around to incorporating the French language stuff, but I would like to support that. I think it would be useful to some people. In terms of managing files, the library uses os.path, the built-in library. And lately in my other projects, I've been using Pathlib's path. It's much nicer for managing files, but I just haven't gotten around to converting it over. So that would certainly be appreciated. Some of my tests are kind of repetitive and they could be parameterized. So if anyone knows about testing and wants to set up some parameterized tests, that'd be nice. That's probably not a beginner issue though. Similarly, currently the backend for StatsCan, the way it stores the tables once you download them is in HDFS, which is nice. It works, it's fast, and the compression is really good, but it's not super well known. So it brings in some dependencies that other people might have trouble with. And it makes it difficult if you wanted to get the data out of that format without using my library. You know, if you want to start working with it in R or something like that, it would be more challenging. So I think if I were to start from scratch and, you know, knowing what I would know now, I would use SQLite as the storage backend. But yeah, so if anyone wanted to contribute a solution they'll let you use SQLite to store the data frames, that would be cool. But that's a big one. So don't take that on as your first issue. The other stuff, you know, adding some example code to the documentation and making sure that it actually runs when the tests are run would be nice. Better logging is always appreciated. And of course, this is a big one, better documentation. Like I said, if there's something in the docs that are confusing or incomplete, I would really appreciate, even if it's just a heads up, even if you don't supply a fix, just sort of letting me know, hey, this part was hard to read, or I didn't really get what I wanted out of the documentation. Just letting me know that, even that would be a really great contribution. Okay, so that's it for the actual talk. I kind of wanted to leave some space for questions because I wasn't totally sure what this audience would be particularly interested in. So Ben, do we have anything in the chat?
Yeah, I've been trying to keep the questions moving as they've been coming along. I guess we do have one that's coming in right now from Celine, who's wondering whether or not, you know, you have to be an expert in GitHub in order to successfully contribute to the project.
I wouldn't say expert. Knowing Git in order to work on at least the software aspect of open source is pretty important. I would really, if you want to build software collaboratively, I would highly recommend learning Git. It's intimidating at first. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It's not the most intuitive tool, but it's really important. So like I said, if you want to just contribute to the documentation, if you've got some suggestions for improving the writing or expanding that, no Git experience required. Just send me a message with the changes that you'd like to see, and I'll do the work of getting it incorporated into Git. If you want to actually add features or improve the code directly, yeah, I don't really see a way around that other than knowing at least some basic Git.
Yeah, and I'd probably there seems to be some interest in maybe a future workshop around Git, and so maybe that could be something that we contribute back to the community. One question that I had,
Sure.
this might be a bit esoteric, but did you have more? What was more challenging, getting things set up using Conda or with the PyPI?
So I tried to do Conda first just because I was using Conda to manage my environments. Again, for my particular use case, it was more important to have a Conda package than a PyPI package. So just because I did it first, Conda was harder. I still find Conda packaging to be a bit of a black box. I think just because it's so powerful. I mean, it handles so much more than just Python libraries. Like it's a full-blown package manager. So it has a lot of power and functionality that wasn't really necessary for my use case, that made just figuring out how to use it challenging. With that said, once I got a package onto PyPy, the process for getting it accepted and moved on to CondaForge is very straightforward, and they have bots that basically take care of everything. So once I kind of got to that later stage in the project where I understood packaging a bit better myself, and I was trying to do everything properly, for lack of a better word, getting it onto CondaForge was actually really smooth.
Cool. And so is there any advice you'd have for somebody who's, you mentioned at the beginning that you started off, only having worked with basic scripting for Python, maybe I think something that a lot of us here can relate to, maybe a data analyst's workflow where you write your Python to do the work and then it's kind of done. And then it sounds like through this process, you've had to learn a lot about more of like the software engineering aspects, packaging, etc. Do you have any advice that you would give people as far as, how to go getting started with that, or maybe even if that is something that they would be interested in the first place?
Sure. So on the tooling side for, building packages and all the sort of stuff that's around but not directly related to writing code, I'd really recommend Hypermodern Python as a resource. If you read through that and kind of build their example package, you'll have a really good sense of everything that goes around building a project. So things like tests, things like building a package, things like uploading to PyPI and having CI and all that sort of stuff. For the actual software engineering side, I don't know if I have as good a just single point resource to mention, but I think that even if your focus is really just on doing analytics, it doesn't hurt to read a few software engineering guides, like just being familiar with principles like dry, don't repeat yourself. So if you're running the same code block again and again and again with slightly different parameters, put that into a function. Learning a bit of object-oriented programming is also really useful. There was, I'll have to find the link for it, but there was a post I read a little while back called Algorithms as Objects that really changed the way I think about object-oriented programming and how it's applied to an analytics workflow that's made my code, not so much for StatsCan, but for packaging or for analytics in general, a lot cleaner and a lot more maintainable. So yeah, even if you're not interested in building a package, even if you never want to push anything up to PyPI, I do think it's worth it to invest some time in developing some general software engineering skills. You don't have to do a bunch of data structures and algorithms. I never invert binary trees for my day job, but learning a little bit of object-oriented, learning how functional programming works or some of the other paradigms is definitely useful.
I'm still waiting for the day that I have to invert a binary tree, and I'm looking for it too. It's an active endeavor to find an opportunity for that. So yeah, I'm with you on that one. Yeah. So I guess we'll just take one more. I'm going to combine two questions into one, so we've got enough time for the demo and workshop. Sure. And so basically, we got two questions that are a similar vein, which is effectively like, how are you using your package in your day-to-day, maybe how it compares to how your workflow went before, and in that same vein, what types of visualizations and analysis are you performing as your package helping you to perform?
Okay, sure. So my role when I started developing this package was specifically as an economist working for WCB. Now I'm in the team lead position. I don't work as exclusively with the economic data, so I'm a little bit away from it. But speaking more broadly for my team, WCB provides coverage for the majority of workers in the province of Alberta. So having an understanding of what's going on in the labor market is obviously critical to us for running our business. So I spend a lot of time analyzing and making presentations on things like the unemployment rate and the level of employment and earnings in the province. Most recently, we've been doing a lot of work to understand the impact of COVID. So StatsCan came up with a very timely table just the past couple of days. I don't think they'd had it before. I certainly hadn't seen it, of active businesses, new business openings, and business closures by month, by sector. And so taking a look at that data and understanding, what sectors of the Alberta economy are experiencing the bulk of the closures, it was definitely useful. I mean, as you'd expect, it's a lot in accommodations and hotels and service industries like that. But yeah, that's the sort of stuff that I typically look at for my day job using StatsCan. In terms of charts, I'll use Seaborn if I'm trying to plot something just statically and that I want to share in like a report or a document. And I'm a big fan of Altair for exploratory work because it's got a really clean declarative syntax, and also for creating anything interactive. It's really good for that. So those would be my tips in that regard.
Awesome, thanks. I think believe you've got did you have a demo that you were going to run through?
So was that for me or for Paula?
Oh, no, that was for you.
I think that was for you.
Oh, okay.
It was an honest question. I can't remember.
This is going to be a real quick one. Connection failed. Okay, maybe. Let's see. If this will launch quick, I do. If it won't, maybe we'll pass it over to Paula. Well, okay, that's pretty quick. Can everyone see this okay?
Maybe can you zoom in a little, zoom in slightly?
Sure, how's that?
That looks good to me.
Okay, so this is going to be a very quick demo of the basic workflow of the StatsCan package, just to kind of give you a taste. And then as you go through Paula's workshop challenges, by all means, you can use this notebook itself, or if you've got it set up on your local environment, that'll work as well. So the first thing you have to do, obviously, is to import the StatsCan package. And there's a StatsCan class that you can create from within that. And basically what you do is you instantiate that class. And as an argument, it'll take a path if you want. So by default, it will just save any tables that it downloads into the same folder that you're running in. But for example, at work, I've got a few people on my team. We all want to use the same data, and we don't all want to have to download it. So we've got a network drive where we store the data. So I would pass in the path to where that network drive is, so they would update the data for everyone. But so we run that cell. And then, the data set that Paula brought up to work with is the data on homeless shelters. So you can pass in either a single table or a list of tables. Sorry, no, table to DF, you could only pass in a single table because it's just going to return one frame. If you want to download a bunch, you could pass in a list. But we run that, tells you that it's downloaded. Here's the nice progress bar that I was mentioning that we didn't have before. Doesn't matter too much for this one because it's a small table, but it's really nice when you're downloading bigger ones. So you can see now it's downloaded. We've got the reference date, the geography, the type of shelter, all that good stuff. And one thing that the StatsCan library does for you is it automatically parses the dates. And then for things like geography, which are, normally would be strings, but are discrete categories, it turns them into a category data type, so that A, makes it a lot faster to work on, and B, really reduces the memory footprint of the data frame. So it's more efficient in that regard as well. The other thing you can do, this isn't going to actually do anything because I just downloaded it, but if you run update tables, it will take a look at all the tables you've downloaded so far. And if any of them are out of date on the StatsCan website, it'll download the fresh versions of them and then return a list of which tables it updated. So in this case, it's an empty list because I just downloaded the table. The other thing you can do, if you just want one particular series and you don't want to download a whole big table, you can use the vectors to data frame remote method, pass it in either an individual series or a list of series, and then the number of periods that you want to retrieve. And then you just get that vector for, but I only get 4 periods there. Maybe it only goes back that far. Oh, I think it does. Okay. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Just wanted to give kind of a very brief overview. I'll pass it over to Paula for the more in-depth workshop stuff though.
Ian, just a question while
Yeah,
we've got you. Well, I'll ask my question first.
sure.
These numbers and keys, where would one go to find these?
Oh, yeah,
This
that's
V1137
right.
esoteric. Where could I find that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, I mean, let's go to, so if we go to Statistics Canada, let's just go to, say, quarterly population estimate, just because that happens to be, oh, that's loading terribly. Oh, let's try a different one. There we go. Consumer price index. Okay, so you can see that the consumer price index is in table 1810, blah, blah, blah. So that's how you would get that. And then if we were just interested in a specific part of it, you can go to add remove data and customize layout. And you can tell it to display vector identifier and coordinate, hit apply. And then you can see that, for example, the Canada all items consumer price index series is V416. So I guess the short answer to your question is the Statistics Canada website will tell you, but that's sort of the workflow that I use to identify, the particular series or table that I'm interested in.
Excellent. And just another question. We did have a question about how somebody can go about using this package in their local repository or in their local environment and online. Maybe you can talk about the binder environment if anybody wants to use it, and then I believe you also have you have some scripts to set up someone's local environment using Conda as well at the GitHub repository. So if you can just maybe mention that, and I'll put those links in here.
Yeah, for sure. So like I kind of briefly mentioned, Binder is an online resource that lets you basically turn any GitHub repository into a live interactive environment. So you can see that in this repository, I've got this environment.yaml file, which specifies all of the packages that I want to have in my environment. So in my case, I just want JupyterLab and StatsCan, nothing fancy, just the basics to do the demo. And then I've got a notebook that is the contents of this notebook here. So if you just add this link to the README of your repository, it will automatically create a Docker container that has all the stuff that you need, and it'll launch when you click this. It'll create the container, launch the live environment, and you're off. If you want to use this, on your local machine, and you're using Conda, you could just install StatsCan from CondaForge. So the command would be like Conda install -c CondaForge. So for channel CondaForge, and then StatsCan. So it would be the same way that you would install pretty much anything else from CondaForge. And if you're more comfortable with PyPI and that's your workflow, you can just pip install StatsCan.
Awesome. I think there's a couple other questions, but maybe these are more relevant to the workshop. And so I think there'll be some questions maybe that might be better answered in the workshop session. Sure. And if they're not answered in Paul's piece of the workshop, we'll be around as we start to work on the workshop to answer any questions. So
yeah, for sure.
maybe we can hand it off.
Okay. Let's just start my video and get my screen. And does no one can really answer unless you found the chat window. Oh, and if I can see my chat window, because it always moves someplace else. Great. So I don't really care if you answer or not. Just kidding. Yeah, maybe I don't. Can't see it. Oh, I see it. Okay. So first of all, I'm trying to figure out how many people have a really good Python coding background, and how many people is more general data. So if you have a really good Python coding background, just type a P in there. And if it's more general knowledge, then D for data. And people who are, oh, PD, excellent. And I'm some P, okay. Yeah, I'm there with a some P as well. P and D, awesome. Okay, so we're a mix and we're kind of all over the place, right? How about give me an R? Just kidding, that was a joke. But, so that helps me a lot. And I do want to say thank you to Ian because like amazing work, incredible. And it does make, I know there's a few of us Koreans here who I work often with, and we get data together before datathons, and this is a way to help actually. Okay, I'm still looking R2D2. Oh, I like that one too. NL, good one. Okay, enough about that. So, okay, excellent. So I think we have people from both camps. And what I did was designed a workshop that actually, or, challenges that utilized previous datathon or what do we call those? Micro datathon stuff that we had before with Data for Good. And also looking at trying to get somebody who is non-experienced, maybe not familiar with Stats Canada, and maybe all the way to the Python, people who know Python really well, and familiar with doing their own Jupyter notebooks and Python environment. And the reason why Power BI is in there is because it's just one way that's free for people who want to do analysis. And I'm giving you a sample that actually uses the Python libraries to get some data too. So I'm trying to please everybody, which is pretty hard. You can't open the Power BI file in Binder because I think it would need a kernel to do that, and it's not there. So where are the files? If you come from Data for Good, I got to move this thing away from my pop-down menu, then you know that we did have used data.world before. Oh, excellent. Thank you. And Python group, the PyData group, are quite well versed in GitHub. So here's the PyData Calgary. Everybody, I can bring that link into the chat again. For those of you used to GitHub, the workshop instructions are here. So I'm just telling you where the files are first. We'll go into a quick look of those. I am providing some Power BI samples, so you can't open them here either, so you're going to have to download them. And then there's a whole bunch of, there's some demo Python and the environment, but then also this zip files. And it's because in my exercises and because we wanted some continuity with what Data for Good did before, there's a whole bunch of files here if you just want to start with them. Okay, because I'm trying to make you think about integrating data and trying to solve a problem that is around, getting a feel for homelessness or in around Calgary and whatever issues might be contributing to that. So again, the workshop instructions are here and there's 2 documents. And if you're in Data for Good, this would be the, Data for Good and familiar with Data World. That would be that page. And you can see the 2 documents there too, and a PBAX file as well. So the same files, 2 different environments. And if you're in the data.world and kind of are interested in doing something with this, I'd love it if you bookmark it. So at least I know somebody else is there. If I only see 2 bookmarks, I might just like call you personally and focus on the GitHub. So feel free to do that. I'm going to jump over to what these 2 PDFs look like. And this is just from the Google Drive that I didn't share this link to you, but this is where we, as Data for Good team, collaborate. And I'll just zip through these here. What happens is we have this workshop or challenges, and it's in a format that we've already established. Karine Jansonius has really been great in creating these documents in the past. And what I did is sort of kept that same format. Karine is actually on the call, so hooray, Karine, she's wonderful. And what we've done in other datathons or micro datathons is, we had a big one, number 2, which I'm going to reference a lot, that had to do with the Statistics Canada census, right? So there's links to that document. There's also in the in that zip file will be those PDFs relevant to the census information that we shared. And then if you're on data.world, Microdatathon 2 has all sorts of things, including those instructions and general census information. So if you're curious about that, you can look at those PDFs. I use those same style, and I'm trying to give you information about Statistics Canada data tables to my best of my knowledge. So, you know, it may not be gospel. There could be some problems, and apparently I'm not a great speller, so there you go. I might have some of that too. But trying to have the same format, I just sort of, the goal here is to get a general gist of what things are, give you some really useful links if you know nothing about. We're going to go here. I'm just going to walk through this though. There's all sorts of StatCan information if you're not familiar with things. I always throw in the geography stuff because I don't know, my background's geophysics and I love maps. So, and eventually, you know, you probably do, postal codes come up a lot, where people live. Unemployment statistics are usually tied to some sort of geography. So it is important. So we have that link there. And the slides, these are Ian's slides that we have here today. So some key quick references for you. I found some great resources on just general statistics, and what these StatCan data tables used to be called was CanSim. Okay, so it's no longer CanSim. It's all StatCan data tables. Ian's package helps us read StatCan data tables. So there's some good, this is a good resource page to begin with, but gives you some more detail of what is available, Census and Stat Canada tables. This is a little explanation about what vectors are. Oh, okay, and yeah, link to Ian's slides. Oh, this, do you have a GitHub? Sorry, Christopher, because I do this, I'm reading and think, I do. Well, it's on GitHub too. If you go to, let's get that menu away from me. The GitHub page here, I'm reading from these two. Does that work for you, Christopher? Oh, I don't know how to use it. Hey, you know what? Maybe a data.world thing might be fun to have, as you know, one night GitHub, one night data.world. Anyways. And so a bit about vectors. Vectors have to do with time, something that happens over time at the repeated information. And you can go right here to search by vector, which I'll give you a little demo on. And the first section of the challenges deal with just using the website and learning about what's available through StatsCan. So that's for everybody. Yeah, you don't need to be a Python programmer, but I guess as you've seen and what you've asked Ian is you kind of have to know where the data is first to go get it and utilize those libraries. And oh yeah, this, if you did have a favorite CanSim table, which I had a few because I've done stuff in the past, which would have referenced CanSim number. This is if it used to be this table, well, now it's called this product ID, which is also key to changing things over to can tables versus CanSim, which is the old system. Okay, this is Ian's documentation, or some of it, not all of it. And I have it here. So it's really quick read. It's excellent, actually. It is a quick start, and this is what I used to put into Power BI as a data source, because I could do that, and I wanted to do that to get people into analysis who weren't familiar with Python, etc. And it worked, so that's great, I thought. And there is all sorts of functionality here, down below. And Ian had mentioned, well, it's awesome because if you are your own organization, do have repeated workflows, these calls will help you figure out what needs to be updated, figure out what you have, and automatically retrieve. Ian, does that sound about right? And with Python, I'm not going to take advantage of that. Just telling you that. I only take advantage of the data frame. So Ian, was it good about what you could do more with the libraries?
Yep, that's a good summary.
Okay, thanks. It's like a layman's interpretation. Excellent. Yeah, so I was, I'd love to spend more time down here. I'm just going to warn you that I personally haven't, but you guys that are into Python could. Okay. The developer's guide, and Ian did show the slide of the web API REST, the web data services user guide. And not everybody has to go there, but if you're interested, you can. What's nice is that Ian's package, you don't have to do that. And equivalent to R, what Ian has done for R, the equivalent functionality does happen with Mountain Math. And I do have a link somewhere there too. I thought it was this, but it's not that. So real-time CanSIP tables is another type of table. And Statistics Canada had a GitHub site. So I put it on there for those developers. This is just a little bit about data tables. So a lot of them, it's not the census. These are not the census. They come from surveys. Surveys happen many times. Thank you very much for that link in the chat window. And there's all sorts of other data that's gathered by StatsCan, gathered from other government agencies, the provinces, for example, think about COVID, the CRA, the revenue agency, vital statistics, deaths again, things like that. And then from other agreements that the actual Statistics Canada have. So, the more I do this data for good and look about open data, and Statistics Canada is incredible, really. And there's, if you can't argue that there isn't enough data, it might be hard to find what exactly you need. Might be the challenge. So what is accessible as data? There's this kind of just as I am going to show you the website, but I'm giving you some sort of detail of what's available. And really, we're just going to concentrate on tables is what we're going to do, but there's all other types of data. And again, just more and more information for you to read later. And their websites, I just sort of took keys from what they had on that website. So maybe I should just go there. And you have all sorts of, you don't need to use the, if it's a one-off, if you're looking for something, you can actually download data directly, which I think Ian showed briefly, or you can write other hooks or whatever. Okay, so Statistics Canada, and Ian did go here as well. This is what the main page looks like. They have updated their site. So there is a data tab. And this data tab, if you don't know what you're looking for, don't have those vector numbers off the top of your head, don't really know what's available, at what geological granularity. Granularity, I'm saying, is referring to a level of detail. So you can get tables that are just on Canada-wide. You can get tables that are on Alberta-wide. You get tables that are on, city, and cities can have sort of many different flavors. And I think at the very last challenge, I talk about census tracts because that's my pet. I like those, if you know me harping on that before. So there's a lot of data here. A lot of it is tables. You can see the numbers here. And of course, there's this other stuff here. Data visualization is actually kind of fun. You could explore that someday, but that's not what we're here for. If you type in, do you want this here? I'm going to actually put this here because this is easy just to play along with. And for the challenges, I'm going to take water for a second. Sorry. Gives you time to type that in because I don't want to cough. I just type in home and hit search. And you can see I have stuff here. Maybe I should have actually said housing. Right? Oops. And it's actually helping me out here. Pretty useful stuff. I can have many searches go. It's narrowing down the tables for me, which is great. So there is a census profile, which is something different, which is what we talked in micro 2. And then there's actual tables, which formerly CanSim. There you go. Telling you that, I could probably get this down using Python and the packages that Ian wrote. You can select even here, central census metropolitan area. Focus this is down even more, 138. I am going to cough. A frequency of delivery, right? Because some of these things happen over time. That's why there's vectors as well. So let's do monthly. So I'm trying to figure, and if I go to one of these, consumer price index, for example, yeah, do I play with this all the time? Always remember your citation. And I do have to actually specify, show me the vector, right? It was under download options. No, it wasn't there. Ian, gosh.
Add remove data.
Oh, add remove, that's it. And I do get there a lot. So, it must be performance pressure.
And then customize layout.
Where am I? Oh, customize layout there. Okay, and display vector coordinate. So apply. Thank you, Ian. So I am actually going to try and take this guy, because if I go back to that main data page, so I'll go back to here where the search thing was. I did copy it, right? I can actually, once I know a vector, search by the vector here. And if I didn't, oh, I did, yay. And then it gives you, so what they've also done is if you do know some stuff, or if somebody gave you a vector and you don't know the detail, well, you get this here and you actually get the table name as well. So, I think I used to rely on Google searches all the time to find key data in the StatsCan. And I find that with this interface here, it's a big, big difference. So, let's look at the challenges. So as I showed you Ian's page, we've got this general stuff here. Something might have, that was the general introduction page, and this is just to get a feel for stuff. Oh, search by vector, sure. Right here, up there. And what's new on our website is actually today is that video about how to use this new interface, which is 5 minutes and it's pretty good too. Okay, back to the challenges. We'd really like you to share the results. So the previous microdatathon would be, if you're on GitHub, it's under the StatsCan demo, and it's this little zip file there will give you a shortcut to everything that I referred to in this challenge set. It's also on Micro 2, which I give you the link, and you can see all the data that we brought together here for that. And it's only basically, I think I'm mostly, giving you examples for collective dwellings, core housing, and shelter capacity. The shelter capacity table is the one that Ian had demoed and is in our challenge. So, yeah, I keep on going to that one. Maybe I'll just get rid of that one. Don't ask me any questions about general stuff. So that's all the data stuff is available. And you can, of course, ask questions if you can't find things. We like people to share things. So you can, if you're on data.world, actually, there's been some debate whether, well, I opened my project way up. So you should be able to have a discussion there and add things there. And we do have this Nextcloud, which this helps you with what the process is for there. And you could stick it on Slack. And really, I don't know, Python guys, are you into, do you tweet stuff for your organization or not? Because if people do great vizzes, why not tweet it, right? Anybody?
We do not have a Twitter presence. It has been on my list to set up a Twitter presence actually for the Data Society as a whole. So if anyone creates a really excellent and inspiring visualization and is able to tweet it at YYC Data Society, that would be awesome.
So we want hashtag YYC Data Society, all one word. Is that right?
Yes.
You better type that in, right? Because I don't know if you do. How many people do visualizations? If you do, there's a lot of people who practice visualizations are on Twitter and often share what they give. And this is good information. I'd be happy, I think, if you shared stuff that way. But tell us too. I don't know, Oscar, is there a hashtag that would Data for Good would listen to? Oh, look at that. Hashtag YYC Microdatathon could be one. Even if there's any other ones in there, Oscar, maybe type it in. Yeah, anyone can use any software.
You can always tweet at Data for Good YYC, our Twitter, or
okay.
I'll paste the link down for Data for Good.
And I'm just going to go to the Slack channel. See, Ian and I are talking on the Slack channel. But there is a Slack channel. Corinne is actually very good at listening to the Slack channel, but since she, took a break and I should do this for this one. There is a microdatathon. You can ask questions here and we hope to answer. And yeah, maybe I admit I will try to be better. And since I'm talking here tonight, I think I need to be looking at this. So is that the right one? Anyways. Oh, microdatathon. Nope, that's locked. Okay, sorry about that. Anyways, Slack is there for communication. We should be listening. We could actually answer things there. You can share files there, etc. Okay, these reference documents, I've got links all over. And then we're down to the challenges. So, so the basic one is all about, you don't care about Power BI. You don't care about Python coding necessarily. You want to apply some learning that we had here. You're going to interact with that StatsCan webpage, basically, and find some stuff. And maybe you could even, see if you can find other things that I'm not mentioning that you think would be helpful if you're investigating homelessness, right? Because our big datathon was that we're building up to, but I'm not sure, maybe even in the future, some more was homelessness in Calgary. So think about that, and maybe you'll find other examples of stuff, and we would love it if you shared that. So we want you to find some other data sets to pull the Python StatsCan package. So same sort of thing. I'm giving you a table. I'm asking a few questions about that. Here's the one on homeless shelters. You know, do you think this one can be downloaded by the Python package versus this one? You know, how do you feel about that? What do you think? And also in the Slack channel, or I guess you can email me. I seem to be getting people to email me a lot. Then you can also ask for answers. I don't have an answer sheet, but maybe we should have that. Intermediate or beginner Python, there's a few questions with that. I have pictures from just the Python shell, my PowerShell on my desk, because I haven't really, I need to know more about Anaconda and everything else. However, I do, so there's all a series just about that. And then there's, I sort of divide you up into, you know, Python and you want to develop your Python skills. You don't really know Python, but we don't want to, you know, we want you to get involved, learn something, also be able to start to analyze stuff. So there's Power BI based here. And then I show you, if you're interested in using the Python to read files in Power Query, because you know Power BI already as a tool, then, or if you don't, there's code in there that's actually working because I'm using Ian's package. And then, so there's a whole bunch of questions. Some of them should be quick answer. And then advanced is, I want you, so this is really geared to the Python bunch, anything you'd like to do to visualize, anything. I have the census tract level of Calgary in that zip file for you, and people can play with that. So yeah, I'm just going to, I also, and this is an example of, okay, just to see what can happen, then I've got my son texting me. He doesn't know that often. And I'm using this income divergence, which in one of the exercise I'm asking you to get, and we're dividing it by census tract, and there, lo and behold, it works. Is this a good use for this type of chloropleth map? Well, it's an index, so it actually is. These Power BI decks aren't the best visualizations, but it's to show you that, oh yeah, there's data there. You can play with it. You can slice it and dice it. Here's a starter if you want to, if you're just at the level of trying to utilize a tool for analysis. In all cases, even if you're doing the Python coding and doing your own Seaborn, etc., you can, we're going to consider collective dwellings, core housing need rate. There you go, and this is just slow to map. So there's another chance to map things here. Homeless shelter capacity. Yeah, you know, I'm shaking my head. Oh yeah, you can see me shaking my head. This is not a good visual representation. Don't judge me. This is just as a starter package for you to do your own. Oh, learn Python for free. Hey, can Ben, and there's a few places to learn Python for free. Oh, you know, you could actually sign up in EDX and just audit, like as long as you don't pay for the certificate. Oh, which question? No. If it oh, I recommend the Hitchhiker's Guide.
Celine's question was, do you need to have high aptitude in math to be successful in data science? And yeah, no, sorry about that, Celine. Just
where was that?
Letting Paula finish off her talk there before getting to your question. But yeah, no, she's asking if you need to have high aptitude in math to be successful in data science. Well,
good question. You know, there's ranges of things. Data analyst, I say, you know, there's degrees. It depends what level of data science you're doing. At a designing visuals, learning information, there's room for the spectrum, I would say. What do you guys say? Anybody else want to throw in there? Smart beyond that one? No? And even for data for good datathons, people can show up and they don't know anything about data, and they're interested. And if you have them in the group, they ask really good questions. It's awesome, because if you are just into math, you know, and we're going to have a conversation about Bayesian statistics, well, you're already quite focused, which is great, but you also need people who knew and to ask questions and to make sure that what you're doing makes sense. Does that make sense? Okay, anyways, so what time is it? 8:23. Was this supposed to end 8:30? Is that a nod? Yes. Okay.
Yeah,
It is,
it's
but I
supposed
mean,
to,
if
it's supposed to
people,
end 8:30, but we can go further if people have questions, or if they want to kind of work on the challenges and ask questions as
Yeah,
well.
and the way we've
It's
done
really
things
agile.
before is for data for good, we have these challenges, and then through Slack and like people do it over a longer term. So, but if you leave now, make sure you look at things. Just kidding. But that's an option. So, yeah, is that good enough? These challenges are ongoing. Really, it'd be nice for people to look at things sooner than later. So if you could come up with some solution or answers, or be active in Slack before the next meetup, either meetup, that'd be good time framing, I think. Corrine, what do you think about that? Because you've really seen a lot of people's work come through. Oh, they don't actually, kind of like that. And if you use the data.world, which you can sign up for free, by the way, and use your Google Gmail account, then it can go on forever. Like basically I created it, so I get messages of if people asked a question through there or add information from there. If that's helpful. GitHub has a new service for a discussion. Is that right? Who's up on that? Ben, Ian, have you noticed that? I created my own repo, right? Okay, so because I wasn't sure that this zip file was going to be here, I actually have a repo of my own, and this is everything that's in that zip file. So there's lots of stuff there. So there's lots of stuff to play with.
yeah, and since we're coming to the end of this, Oscar, since you're the host, maybe we can allow people, since we're coming to the end of the formal session, we could, if anybody wants to stay on and has questions or wants to engage in discussion, I'm not sure what people's schedules are. They may need to drop off, but I can stick around for a few minutes if we want to allow people to unmute for the time being.
Yeah, we had 58 people.
Yeah,
Quite a few still.
Yeah, I've just done that, so I believe
yeah,
everyone can
everybody
unmute themselves if they have any
unmute
questions.
and say hi all at once. This is what I like doing. Yell out your favorite tool all at once.
Hammer.
A hammer. Oh, that's a good one. Oh, that was Len, wasn't it? Was it? Did I catch it?
SQL.
SQL. Oh, yeah, Corrine, I love SQL. And SQLite as a tool. Guess what?
Yeah.
You need to know SQL.
My favorite is the C++ developer who's asking about how to learn Python. It's like, well, you know, Python is just pseudocode. So if you can write C++, you can write Python.
Yeah.
It doesn't hurt to try and learn a little bit of Python idiom and the thinking. I can't help but notice that there seems to be a great gap between those working with data and just managing software and learning about software. Like Ian's journey is amazing. I can't help wonder if there can't be some opportunity for the software meetup groups and the data meetup groups to share more. And I have to assume you've already investigated that. So I'm curious, what kinds of things are these communities doing collectively to share knowledge?
Yeah, I can speak a little bit to that. So obviously, I saw a reference to PyYYC, which is run by Carson Zhang. Him and I have collaborated on a few meetups. We've collaborated on a few joint PyYYC, PyData meetups in the past, and this is actually a topic that's close to my heart as someone who's both, a software engineer and a data scientist. I get, like Ian, I get a lot of deep value from the software knowledge and software experience. So it's it's not something that we're great at right now in Calgary. For transparency, I think that I would echo that sentiment, that we typically have a data group and we have a software group, and they don't intermingle as much. For things that we can do to improve it, there's a Slack channel called YYC Design and Development that has a lot of the development community over there, Rainforest, Alberta as well. And, just if anyone has any ideas for collaboration in the future, that's a passion project of mine. And so you can always reach out to me directly, breeves@viewpointgroup.ca. My email's in the Git repository. So yeah, always, it's an area of improvement, but something that I think would be great for Calgary to pursue.
It's funny. I was at a PyYWC conference last night, and both of the talks were data analysis. The first one was credit risk modeling, and the second one was, I can't remember the exact name, it was like answering business questions with data. So I think the developers are starting to colonize the data science side, but yeah, I'd like to see more of data folks go over to the development side.
Yeah, machine learning is close to, if not already, an engineering field. And
I'm quite sure I've met you at one of these meetups in the past. I'm sorry to have missed last night. To be fair, of course, hello, Corinne, both domains, software development and data, are essentially infinite. So what do you do?
Yeah, there's only so much time in the day, right? Whenever I'm learning software engineering stuff, I'm kind of kicking myself because I should be learning more data stuff. And whenever I learn more data stuff, I think I should be learning more software engineering. So it's hard to find that balance.
Mm-hmm. But that's the wonder of being in a place where you're actually building value, when you're in between something and you're building an interface between them. So
part of what's important is just realizing the things are important and knowing how to communicate. You don't need to know everything, but you just need to know how to talk with a software developer. Software developer needs to know why they should care about data, or about data beyond this one app. And if you just know some of the questions to ask or have some respect for the issues, then you can collaborate, and it's through collaboration that you'll really accomplish more than you could alone.
Yeah.
So something like this is great to see what's out there with Python, to learn tools to get at the data faster, better. It's one step towards bringing out the best in us.
Yeah, and more resiliently, there's been we've had a lot of talk this session about Git and all of the goodness that Git does in the software world. And it's actually, there's been a lot of advancements towards Git for the data side, specifically, typically on machine learning and deep learning, where you've got, sensitivity to the data sets for the trained models. But, Git for Git tools that can handle large data sets are coming out, and is an area of active development because...
Sorry.
Nice.
I'm going back on mute.
Yeah, good seeing you. Yeah. So yeah, it's an area where, you know, you see this cross pollination, and it adds a lot of, you know, distinct value to both sides of the equation, right?